Stop making children and teenagers the human shields of your political movements, you fucking cowards. While you're at it, stop browbeating your children with doomsday rhetoric about climate change and giving them anxiety disorders in the process. You are no better than hyper-religious, Bible-thumping rapture enthusiasts who scream about the end of the world on the daily. You are the same. You are what you hate in the other side. 12 years from now, we are not all going to be smoldering ashes on melted pavement, you deluded fearmongers. The skewed propagandic nonsense on this topic runs so deep it's impossible to even get into, and it goes back decades. The reason 97% of climate scientists agree on significant man-made climate change is quite literally because they're paid to. They're funded by the federal government and left-wing organizations who blatantly don't fund scientist groups that aren't likely to produce results in line with what they want them to find. In 2009, there was a scandal referred to as ClimateGate, in which a very prominent climate scientist and his circle of cooperators had emails leaked which showed them conspiring to skew scientific evidence and blackball experts who didn't agree with them. Between 1989 and 2015, the federal government spent over $32 billion on climate research, which far surpasses any contributions made by fossil fuel or oil companies, or whoever else you'd expect to have some stake in denying climate change, although it's been shown that they've funded both sides of that debate. Over 31,000 scientists have signed a statement saying they don't agree with climate alarmism. The reportedly fastest melting glacier in Greenland is actually growing in size for a third year straight. One of the melting glaciers they found literally had an active volcano in it, but humans are somehow responsible for melting that shit? Did we build a lava-filled volcano in a solid block of ice when I wasn't looking? What happened to the ozone layer? Remember that talking point from years ago about how we destroyed it beyond recovery? Well, it's recovering. Has been since 2014. Here's a news headline from the Associated Press. UN predicts disaster if global warming not checked. The date? 1989. It said we had till the year 2000 to do something or it was gonna be very bad. So far, the only disaster is watching a Swedish teenage girl scream and dance like a trained seal for her climate alarmist puppet masters. And I'm not attacking her. She's a product of her upbringing. She can't help what she believes because the people giving money to her family so they can make fucking posters out of her are telling her she's right. And she's autistic, so it's even worse. It's absolutely despicable that she's being paraded around and used like this. Dude, a week ago, I was like, yeah, there's probably significant climate change, and it's probably man-made, and probably the oil companies are ensuring nothing is done, and probably bad things will happen in the coming decades. I was never all fire and brimstone about it, and the Green New Deal has never not been absolute garbage legislation. I'm not a lunatic. But I was like, yeah, we're in a fight to save the planet eventually, and we're gonna start with plastic straws, because baby steps. That's always been dumb, too. That shit wouldn't make even the tiniest dent. One country banning straws, people are like, every little bit helps, but there's no amount of BB pellets you can fire at an aircraft carrier that'll make that bitch sink. But the stuff climate activists don't tell you could fill entire libraries, like any of the things I mentioned previously times 1,000. I'd have called what I'm about to say some tinfoil hat BS not too long ago, but the only possible explanation I can think of for people on the left to prop up climate change as a doomsday scenario is to seize power through fear and enact socialism. Straight up. Straight up, that's what they want. If conservatives took up that mantle and were like, you guys are right, we're all gonna do something about climate change, and it became a unanimous issue, so they kept getting voted in instead of Democrats because of their other policies, the Democrats would drop that shit like a baby with a cleft palate, and they'd find something else to champion for relevance. Because when you're on the side of big government, you want to be running that government. When you want government to take control of as many things as possible, you don't want your opposition at the reins. You'll do what it takes to prevent that, and you're totally fine to do so on the pretense of fear because you want people to be too scared to vote for anyone else. When you think about it, the left runs pretty much entirely on a cocktail of fear and morality, with basically every issue. Republicans do that too sometimes, like with immigration, for example, but Democrats are very locked in with that tactic. You might say Republicans do anti-abortion as a fear thing, but I disagree. Abortion is already a thing. You can't fearmonger about something that's been normalized nationwide for the last 46 years. They take a more pure morality stance instead, which is much nicer than fear. fear if you ask me. But the left's stance on immigration is fear of xenophobia, plus the morality of rescuing fleeing immigrants who are definitely never human traffickers and gang members that have been deported multiple times. Their abortion stance is the fear of men controlling women's bodies, and the morality of a woman's right to choose, which is all horseshit, but there's no need to cover that in this series again yet. And their climate stance is the fear of all of us burning to death while the oceans swallow all the continents, and the morality of saving Mother Earth who has nurtured us for millennia at her own expense, although you could argue that's what she's there for. Gun control, the fear of all of our children dying, and the morality of not letting all of our children die with a healthy splash of purposeful ignorance when it comes to guns themselves. And then I can't even think of other issues. Immigration, abortion, guns, and now climate activism have become the big four, and anything else is so much lower on the food chain. Minimum wage for the left, the fear of being poor, and the morality of not wanting to be poor. So go ahead and double the reward for labor and then pretend that doesn't simultaneously double the cost of labor, which will be mitigated by cutting your hours to the point of your salary not changing in the slightest or just getting straight up canned. Tough to enjoy a raise when you're out of work. But back to using your children as political human shields for your hand-me-down ideology, knock that shit off. I don't care who's doing it. If you want to wheel your kid out in front of a podium and expect her to be taken seriously like she's an adult, then prepare for her to be treated like any other adult in politics, where she will be ridiculed, attacked, criticized, questioned, and parodied like the adult you're trying to pass her off as, because you can't cut it in the political circuit yourself, so you bring out a less knowledgeable but equally visceral yet more innately innocent version of yourself to elicit sympathy, so we'll be too busy going, "Aw," and wiping our tears away to notice all the trash you've got her peddling, talking about how we destroyed her childhood and doomed her to die. It's an implanted fucking delusion in her head, courtesy of her useless parents and a media that trips over itself, racing to score ratings and sway votes off a disabled girl's focus-tested rambling. The younger the better. They had to settle for 16 with this one, but they'd happily trot out a 2-year-old and just have somebody operating him like a ventriloquist dummy with a voiceover for the audio. Climate change is bad, and it makes me very sad. And if you question our side's federally funded findings, you should burn in hell, which is what Earth will be when I'm 14 years old. Also, my mommy hasn't decided my gender yet, so my pronouns are fuck you. That one was just for fun. It's a goddamn circus. This 16-year-old and some other young activists apparently signed a thing condemning 5 countries for human rights violations in regard to climate change, and guess who isn't on it? China, the world's biggest polluter. Are you fucking daft? I thought the adults who drew up that shit were supposed to be putting saving the planet above all else, but evidently the continued existence of our species isn't as important as the continued existence of our relations with China, or else it's not about saving the planet. Maybe it used to be, but it sure ain't now. It's about blaming the West. It's about putting America out to pasture and deconstructing it and rebuilding it because we're always the villains of everything somehow. It's about impeaching Trump and enacting socialism and impeaching Kavanaugh, whose whole deal got trotted back out for another couple days and failed miserably after the New York Times ran a story of a new allegation without electing to mention that the supposed victim has no memory of the incident and her friends didn't believe it either, until they sheepishly posted a correction days later and nothing came of it. It's pathetic to watch them work. It's such transparent desperation. It would be unbelievable if it wasn't so par for the course. Climate change is real and it's America's fault is complete unscientific nonsense. China is the leading cause of emissions, but if they're not big enough to put in your little call-out paper, I don't think you're actually trying to save the Earth, assuming it needs saving to begin with. This is all an act, a charade for attention. Vote for us. Put us in every position of power imaginable, or we are all going to die. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Sunburned Albino, and I will see you guys next time.